Everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Just had the opportunity to check in with Jennifer Lawless down at American University about things taking place inside the Beltway. We're going to, speaking of beltways and roads, tack to an issue a little bit closer to home here. Chris Maxwell with the Rhode Island Trucking Association is around the corner and is going to join me to discuss a few developments with the toll debate.
Hi,
Nice to
Dave.
see you again.
Great to be back.
Thanks for coming in. I'm going to have you take a little
All
step
right,
back
yes,
here
all right.
and
I remember the
talk with
routine.
folks. A few things happened this week that we got wind of.
We did.
Delays and implementations.
Yep, which is always a good thing. Every day without tolls is a good day, we say, in our business.
So talk with us a little bit about that before we move on to the next topic, which is some community feedback and involvement. This delay, when how much of the lines of communication open between the Trucking Association and the state of Rhode Island? When do you get wind of these developments?
When the public gets wind of them. We have very little heads up prior to the public. We've been trying to get this information via FOIA requests and public information requests, and that we've really not been served well on that. So lo and behold, we get the Louis Berger report, $1 million study that the taxpayers paid for, simultaneous to the environmental assessment study. We've been crying for since 2015 for some transparency on this. The state has not been very cooperative. We feel at this point, after we met with the Federal Highway Administration in late August and really complained that we really had our hands behind our back in terms of information coming to us. In that respect, we feel that what we're seeing now with the EA being released, and by the way, this environmental assessment is not permission to toll. It basically is permission now to move to the public comment period, and it's in no way, shape, or form is it approval for tolls. Just like the memorandum of understanding is not approval for tolls, nor is the environmental assessment. It simply means that we can move this to the public commentary period on November 21st. That commentary period stays open until December 6th, at which it really becomes a chess game and a ping pong match back and forth, and hence you have the delay into as late as March. And we feel if we do our job and we move this to what we feel is a deeper, more widespread dive called an environmental impact study under the NEPA law, then you'll see this delayed even more. But I think that's what the public needs. That's what our industry needs. We need to see broad scale, like a circulatory system, like an MRI. What the net effects from 30,000 feet are to this economy. If a truck goes, we're looking at under the EA at a couple of spots down in South County.
Very
Yes,
isolated.
Very isolated.
Very isolated.
And a diversion route of Route 3 for Teft Hill Road and Mechanic Street. We need to look more globally at what could conceivably be 33 gantry tolling points statewide, and to see what like when they put dye in your system, and see what the net effect is. What's the diversion going to be? What's the local congestion and road degradation going to be? What's the impact on consumer goods going to be in lower income areas? What is a truck choosing to go 395 to Route 6 in 44 to Smith Street to get in Providence? What's that going to do to a community with safety and Jake, what we call those loud Jake brakes going on? As I just had a conversation with somebody down in Hopkinton concerned about the noise. What is a truck coming in 195 getting off at Broadway and then maybe working its way up Hope Street into Providence versus going on the interstate going to do? And we also learned, besides the delay, besides the revelation that the EAs are out, is that the DOT is now backing off its initiative to impose restrictions on the secondary routes, which essentially they can't do. Trucks have right to rest breaks and party breaks and things like that. So it's really tough for them to enforce that, and I'm glad to see at least they've infused some common sense into that.
So let's talk about, you're in the trucking jargon here.
Yes.
And we want to break it down for folks. This environmental assessment, the EA,
That's right.
as you talk
Correct.
about, Did they do this for all of the locations, or just the two ones that were going to be first?
No, they will do it for these two locations. There was a really kind of a conflict in terms of what the local administrator, when I met with him some time ago, indicated in his estimation, Rhode Island was deserving of a full EIS and a full environmental impact statement. RIDOT wanted to have an EA, a more focused
On just
on
individuals,
these two things.
because
So eventually the EAs will happen at all of these locations. What it will do is allow RIDOT to proceed and at least get the gantries up, the toll gantries up, whether they're trying to bait us into a lawsuit or they just want to start the revenue process. Inevitably, you're going to see a small cross-section of what happens. We feel, and we're going to prove this out, we hope, during the open comment period and whatever other means, that as the local administrator, and I think inevitably that the feds in DC are going to see that they have to get this particular plan right. This is a groundbreaking initiative. It is basically opens up interstate tolling under a narrow bridge exemption, where they call large bridges like the George Washington bridges. Now we're tolling overpasses. So it's revolutionary in that respect. You're also tolling what we feel in a discriminate fashion, the truck industry. So we feel that the Federal Highway Administration really wants to get this right, and really the only way to get this right is from a full EIS. So what that means is, in our estimation, this will put the implementation of tolls further down the road until we can see from a global 30,000-foot standpoint what the overall net effect, positive or negative, is on this plan. But I think we need to move it to an EIS.
So with this EIS approach, and I'm sure the trucking industry is lobbying this, how does this process work? How does the trucking industry say, we need the EIS? How do you make the case? And then who ultimately makes that decision in what time frame?
The Federal Highway Administration will make that case. And we look at the Lewis Berger report, the $1 million report I mentioned before. We look at the traffic counts. We look at things like I just mentioned before, the fact that the diversion, they said that diversion won't be a factor because 50% of that diversion will be taken care of by those route restrictions. Well, those route restrictions, as we learned yesterday, have gone away. So we will pick this apart. as you know, we've got a team in Washington D.C. We've got people locally doing it. We will look at this and genuinely pick it apart and look for exposures that will hopefully lead this thing to an EIS. But again, when you think about environmental, even in the most recent EIS, the EA, there's some, on the second location, there's some problems with the Department of Environmental Management, with some watershed areas. So those types of things. Again, in fairness to the public, we feel that this needs to move to a more a deeper dive, a more holistic approach to, as I said, like a circulatory system.
Well, how long would an EIS take?
Well, an EA, an environmental assessment, realistically, this could go to open comment to December 6th, go back to the feds. Again, they have not approved this. This could go to the feds. This could be, again, a ping-pong chess game back and forth on these two locations.
On just the EA
right.
itself.
And then we would get those approved, and then we would move perhaps up the road to Centerville Road, then up the road to my favorite bridge, the perfectly intact Oxford Street Bridge, that we can't figure out why they're touching a bridge that's in such great shape. But they would continue doing these.
That's from the EA perspective.
Right,
if you were
correct.
successful in making the case with the Federal Highway Administration to get that whole...
This would stall the whole plan, and they would say, we got to step back and look at
And
this
how
plan.
long would that take? How long would an EIS take?
I don't know specifically, but I know it would take a lot longer than what we're doing right now.
Take a long time. And, now that, because what we know is that this EA, this environmental analysis, is going to be held to public comment.
That's correct.
How many people do you expect turning out for this? Don't forget, it is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
And we thank the director of Federal Highway and the governor for not making it on the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Was the Tuesday before sort of like the second choice?
We'll take anything they give us, and we took a look at that as a gesture. Even, the last hearing they had on the I forget what it was. It was the holiday weekend, Columbus Day on Friday at 2:00. So, this is so that's 6:00 on November 21st. We will hopefully the people, the stakeholders in those areas, the merchants, the people in Hopkinton, Exeter, Richmond are going to show up either just to hear what's going on or express their support or their dismay. We have a team coming in from Washington, D.C. We will have carriers there talking about what the shifts, what their strategic plan will be should this whole plan come to fruition. So we expect a pretty decent turnout.
So we're taking a look now at the public comment period for the EA.
Yep.
The Trucking Association is pushing for a more holistic environmental impact statement.
Yes.
Again, the push. This is the EA, and this as you the back and forth has
EA,
pushed.
EIS, EIEIO.
EIS.
So,
but the ultimate conclusion right now is that we've seen the delay in the implementation of these first two tolls.
Almost 3 years.
What are the next steps for the Trucking Association besides pushing for the EIS and monitoring the community input?
Well, basically to hopefully get it to the EIS. If it goes to if the EA process is found to be adequate and the tolls do go up sometime in March, we will strategically either strike quickly or more likely step back. It's been talked about that they'll put the task entries up and they're going to bait a lawsuit. I don't know how you bait a lawsuit to see if something's constitutional when you have good solid legal ground that what you're doing in the first place is constitutional. We're not going to be baited into a lawsuit. We will strategically, as an industry with the American Trucking Associations and all other stakeholders, look at our strategy and how best to strike, where to strike, who's going to sue, from where, and on what grounds. There are a number of grounds from commerce situations to things like a daily cap that we feel helps the local guy, which we don't have a problem helping the local guy, but you can't. We learned this back in the early game when they were giving $13 million in tax credits to local businesses to offset this. You cannot favor local business on an interstate playing field, so it's going to be very difficult. So we will unless common sense prevails in Rhode Island and somebody takes the governor. I believe the governor, if she had her druthers, she would have made a different decision. She was sold some bad information, and now she cannot pivot to get out of this. I think that Rideout's been hijacked by a group that feel that the promised land is tolling of not just trucks but cars. But I think that this whole thing is a bad policy.
Before we go, and I just want to touch upon what you talked about being baited into a lawsuit, and as you said, by the implementation of just two tolls. Is the thought that they would bait the Trucking Association in and then ultimately be found because it isn't the entirety of the tolling, that they think that's their best case, the states that is, to be successful from a challenge?
No, I think it's really clearly a case of if the Lewis Berger report that I just mentioned earlier says that 2% of the tractor trailers constitute only 2% of the traffic in that area. Yet we're going to be shouldering 100% of the burden. Right then and there, you look at a case like that and look at, in fairness, economics, discrimination, however you want to look at it. That's what we're looking at in a multitude of other issues.
So why wouldn't you sue right away then? Why would you be afraid of being baited?
And I am not an attorney, although I play one on TV. I think that realistically, and I'm not even sure this is going to hold up, there has to be some damage, some impact. There has to be a toll assessed. before you can actually trigger the lawsuit.
Okay, well, we're going to continue to keep an eye on that, but continue to keep an eye on
sure
the
will.
community input, again, with this environmental analysis for the 2 proposed toll locations that the time frame has been pushed back on.
Yes.
So we're going to continue to talk with the state and the Trucking Association. Chris Maxwell,
pleasure,
I
Kate.
appreciate
Thanks
your
for having
taking
me.
the time.
Appreciate it.
I'll let you around the corner.
Great.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with our final guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.